Just to start things off, I'd like to say that this review is for promotional purposes. I've been speaking with the producer, Kenneth Hansebraten, now for a good while, and he suggested I take a look at this project. I'm not being paid to talk about it, nor am I directly involved in the production. I just gave it a watch, enjoyed it, and thought you guys might like to hear about it. Also, please check out the Terrible Vices Facebook group if you get a chance. It's a genuinely awesome little group of horror enthusiasts with a really nice atmosphere and some lovely people. Anyway, on with the show. Dead World is a 2017 Norwegian horror production directed by John Hesby and produced by Kenneth Hansebraten. It's the first part of a planned 4-part series of short films that are framed around the beginning and ongoing scenario of the zombie apocalypse. The first part, clocking in at approximately 24 minutes, is a montage following several characters handling the scenario in different ways. Speaking to Kenneth about the production, he informed me that each episode will chronicle an individual character's storyline, though there will be some elements that will converge, meaning the plot of one story may well cross over with that of another. The bulk of this short follows Sarah, a young woman who's in the process of moving house with her parents. When the outbreak happens, one of the family gets infected by a zombie bite, and Sarah and the rest of the family have some difficult choices to make as the risk of further infections becomes greater and greater. As the short goes on, we also see other people involved in the zombie apocalypse, though these sequences are largely only teased, so it may be the case that they have more involvement in later parts. One of the first things that struck me about this was just how absolutely beautiful the cinematography was throughout, with some gorgeous crisp shots and a really nice use of symmetry and shallow depth of field, which achieves an enjoyable visual experience. This film really pops with a nice range of experimental and very colourful composition choices that left me genuinely eager to see more of this movie's style and how it could develop in further instalments. The only thing that maybe stood out to me was a possible slight overdependence on slider shots. But I suppose everyone's taste is different, and I appreciate that some people really like those kind of shot setups, so each to their own. The direction's also really well handled, with Hesby really getting the best out of the locations and the cast. When good cine and good direction go hand in hand as they do here, you're really setting yourself up for a treat. And this film definitely doesn't disappoint in that regard. All of the location work has a very distinct, striking style about it that takes some real talent to achieve. Particularly the sequences towards the end of the house sequence and the warehouse loft sequences, which really ooze atmosphere. The cast all seem to have been well guided as well, with some very natural reactions and responses throughout this short. I can only say I'd be very interested to see more of John's work in future. I also feel that I need to say here that the editing is rock solid, with nice tight cuts, a good use of quick cutting and pace management that helps to raise the tension, and some really nice uses of transitions as well, particularly during one sequence that to me was very heavily reminiscent of some of the transition work from Shaun of the Dead. This film aims high, and when the editing is on a par with the cinematography and the direction in being this good, it only further pushes the film up there in my opinion. I was also very surprised to see what these guys had achieved considering their budget. Dead World would be considered a low, no-budget film by industry standards, with a total budget of roughly $600, which left me frankly astounded as to what I was seeing. That they could achieve what they have here for this kind of money is ridiculous. I'd really love to see what they'd do if they had more funding, because if this is what they can do for $600, Lord knows what they'd be able to do on a feature budget. I was very impressed. The script is reasonably tight. Sadly, English is my native language, so I was unable to understand the dialogue from a delivery standpoint, but luckily there are subtitles provided. Not that this film is particularly dialogue heavy anyway. It relies quite a bit on physical acting, and that's where the cast of this production really shine. With Catherine Satra being absolutely outstanding as Sarah, giving a performance that genuinely stunned me. She's really utterly watchable. Ergin Björn also performs brilliantly as Sarah's dad, giving a lively performance that's both highly animated and emotive where necessary. The soundtrack to me is arguably this film's weakest string, but that really isn't saying much. Where the soundtrack works, it works brilliantly, and they've chosen their score well. There are just a couple of tracks dotted throughout, usually for me personally the more heavier, rockier tracks, that just didn't quite do it for me. I'm a traditionalist though. I like minimalist scores in my horror films. The kind that add atmosphere without being too prominent. It must also be said that the effects in this film are wonderful. To me they have a good, solid, gory hammer vibe about them. And in many ways I'm really glad they've gone for the buckets o' blood option with this one, as in my opinion, when it comes to zombie movies, the bloodier the better. And the ruby red blood used here is highly reminiscent of early Hammer Dracula films, and with gore shots that are both vivid and effective, I really have to say that they've knocked this one out of the park. The only minor critique I could draw is that I would have to say one or two of the more minor effects don't quite land as intended. But again, for the budget they're working with, I'd have to argue it's pretty negligible in the scheme of things. This movie's been inspired by a broad range of influences, both consciously and subconsciously. Romero's original Of the Dead trilogy is a very clear inspiration throughout this production, particularly Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead, as is Peter Jackson's Brain Dead and The Evil Dead 2. In fact, there's a quite nice homage to The Evil Dead 2 in particular in this short that left me grinning from ear to ear. The cine and direction seems to have a very Euro horror vibe about it, and Kenneth told me that a lot of the directional decisions and shot choices were heavily influenced by Italian cinema. On the whole, this project took approximately 7 years to realise, and this included a period where the film was effectively put on hold due to a massive hard drive failure in which a lot of the footage was almost lost in its entirety. It was a chance encounter with a publishing company who became interested in seeing some of the material as it stood that led to this film getting a commercial release. Though as a result, there was a bit of a race against time to ensure that the film's final edit was completed. The footage was reorganised and reshoots were planned for the footage that was still outstanding, and I think that this is a first, but I believe this is the first and probably only film to be reviewed on my channel that was presented in 2K. Deadworld had its premiere at a short film festival in November 2017, and Part 2 is well into the scripting stage at this point in time. It's being promised to be bigger, gorier, and even better than the first offering, and I'm definitely excited to see how this series progresses. It's a unique and affectionate tribute to horror films of the past, while adding a modern flair to proceedings that's very much welcome. Frankly, the amount of love these guys seem to have put into this production is clearly visible, and Kenneth's made it very clear to me that this was a definite passion project, with both him and John holding multiple roles in the production to keep costs down, and to make sure that everything was done to get as close to the vision that they had in their heads as possible. While there isn't a firm release date for this film in the schedules just yet, Kenneth's assured me that the film will be coming out at some point between March and April of this year, and I do seriously recommend you go and check it out if you get the chance. I'm told the Blu-ray will have plenty of extras, including music videos that were shot with the cast of Dead World, that were also inspired by this movie's tones and themes, and plenty more. You can find out more information on the film from the Underground Gore Collectors. I've put a link in the description to their Facebook page, and I highly recommend throwing them a message or some love. These guys deserve it. Having been involved in the rough and tumble that can come with no-budget filmmaking, I know that it's one of the harshest and most unforgiving challenges a filmmaker can set out to achieve in. And I've seen plenty of people throw in the towel or produce subpar movies as a result of not being dedicated to the filmmaking process. Dead World is one of the very few films I've seen that's actually astounded me at just how much they've been able to achieve for the budget and scale. If I hadn't known how much this film cost to make, I'd have genuinely thought it was a higher budget production. A bubbling pot of creative ideas and a beautiful gore-stravaganza. If this is what can be achieved on a small budget, God knows what it would look like with some serious cash behind it. Check this out if you can. You'll not regret it.